The names have been changed to protect Bram Stoker's estate.
You're still listening. This is our final transmission.
Oh, we're here, Jamie. Welcome to Final Transmission, a podcast where I, Sam Russo, and you, Jamie Carruthers, talk about one horror movie per week until the end of time. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Sam. How are you?
Very, very well. Very excited about this evening's topic of conversation.
Me too.
Why?
Because it's a classic, Sam.
Yeah?
I think this is the best film of its type.
Wow, holy fuck, what does that mean? We're talking about Hammer Horror's 1958 Dracula, or Horror of Dracula, depending on where you live.
I think it's the best Dracula film.
What?
Straight out the gate. I'm laying down the law.
Good grief and queefing beef. What are you talking about? Why? What?
I think Christopher Lee is the perfect Dracula. This film captures the book as best as you're ever going to do it.
Carry on.
And I think it's cool as fuck.
Okay, I'll take your last point. Addressing your other points. Christopher Lee is in this movie for about 20 seconds. He has 16 lines of dialogue, and he doesn't do much. And the plot is completely different to the book.
That is not true.
Yeah. What? Yeah, it is.
I think it truncates the book in a way that captures the book without having to like slavishly recreate every scene.
So what you're saying, like it captures the atmosphere and the sort of general themes.
Yeah.
Rather than like a rote retelling.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which the 1931 Universal Dracula is way off book, I would say.
Yeah.
Obviously, Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula is a lot more faithful to the book, but I don't think it captures it anywhere near as well.
Interesting. So there's a lot to dig into there. We should probably do a whole podcast on this.
Yeah, it's almost like we picked it for a reason.
There's going to be some serious discussion points here. So Horror of Dracula is the US release name, right?
Yes.
So just Dracula to us Brits. Hammer was always off limits to me as a kid/teen. My parents didn't really know anything about horror per se, so they would forbid me from things they did know about, like Hammer Horror, but let me watch whatever else I wanted because they assumed it was fine. My dad just had this thing that Hammer Horror and Iron Maiden were not things for me to be involved with.
Yeah, I think they're pretty mainstream, aren't they, for like our parents' generations? Like, they were the things. There are two things that everybody knew about.
It's a really easy reference point for, what kids shouldn't be doing, isn't it? Oh, it's Hammer Horror, no chance. Oh, it's as gory as a Hammer Horror movie. Like, all of it was nonsense.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really allowed anywhere near them. What about you? I guess you were probably spoon-fed them in the crib.
And I mean, not so much. I cultivated my love of Hammer a little bit later. I think that I was always like a Universal horror kid. So
just a creepy old man trapped in a child's body.
Yeah, like if I still had a child's body, that would still be true.
Apart from the ones in your basement.
Yeah.
Carry on.
What was I saying? I've forgotten.
You were talking about how you cultivated your love of Hammer Horror from an early age, even though you were, in fact, a ghoulish little Universal goblin.
Yeah, I think like the Universal films were maybe similarly to like how your parents were anti-Hammer. They were just sort of, you could easily watch them on a Sunday afternoon. They'd be on like Channel 4 or BBC 2. And Hammer movies are a lot more violent, I think, than the Universal stuff. I mean, obviously, the Universal Dracula came out in 1931. And so we've got, 27 years between that and this.
Yeah.
Where you could make something feel a little bit less twee. I don't think that the original Universal Dracula is particularly twee, but I think it's a sort of a bloodless product of the 30s and what you could get away with at that time. I don't think even it was particularly controversial when it came out. And I mean, also, Hammer isn't really Hammer at this point. This is their second horror film that they've made. But they do sort of become what you would consider like more violent and a bit more sort of sexually charged than other horror movies that were coming out around this time. And so, I mean, that speaks to me.
Yeah.
I like my horror to be gory and also sexually charged.
Gory and sexy. I mean, the catalogue goes bananas later on, doesn't it? This is like very reserved, almost, quite artistic filmmaking, especially by comparison to some of the later offerings.
Yeah. So I spent a long time basically recoding my brain to understand that the Hammer Frankenstein and the Hammer Dracula and all of those other Hammer movies, the Hammer Mummy, basically figure out or teach myself that they're superior.
Right.
And I've successfully done that at this point.
You've convinced yourself, basically.
And
okay.
And we'll get into the details of why, but I think that fundamentally the reason that they're better is because Peter Cushing is one of the greatest actors that has ever lived.
Hammer's gentleman, as they like to call him in the Hammer fandom.
And I mean, he's just incredible.
Yeah, he's fine.
And I'll get into some of the nuances to why I think he's so incredible later. But he is incredible. Christopher Lee, I mean, his Dracula, again, we will probably go into some depth on that. But the sort of ferocious sexuality of Christopher Lee as Dracula is worlds away from like the tragically romantic Bela Lugosi.
Is that what you think's happening here? Ferocious sexuality?
Yeah.
He looks like a fucking nerd.
No, I don't think so. I think like...
This is the dweebiest Dracula. By the way, not a criticism. I really like this movie. He is such a fucking dork.
The dweebiest Dracula is actually...
Dweebula.
Well, that's his cousin, right?
Dorkula.
Yeah, there you go. That's better. Do you want to try that again without me talking over you?
No.
It's actually the Dracula, which is meant to be the same Dracula, but in the Seven Golden Vampires or whatever it's called, like the Shaw Brothers Kung Fu Dracula that they made.
This feels like a deeply niche reference that I'm just not going to get. Sorry.
I mean, it's not deeply niche because it's in the same series of movies that we're talking about here. So
so there's a dorkier Dracula than this one.
Yeah, absolutely. The guy that plays Dracula in the Seven Golden Shaolin Vampires or whatever it's called.
Seven Golden Shaolin Vampires. What?
Yeah, it was a.
The Legend of Seven Golden Vampires.
Yeah. Basically, I can't remember if it was Golden Harvest or Shaw Brothers had a deal with Hammer to make like a bunch of crossover movies that involved Kung Fu. Right. So
the movie looks rad. Dracula does not look as dorky as Christopher Lee.
No, well, he is. He's his spirit has been eaten by a Shaolin master, and so there's this old kung fu guy who is, got the spirit of Dracula inside him. It's fucking stupid. Peter Cushing is still Van Helsing.
Yeah.
Giving it all he's got, and it's not much at that age.
No, not much beans left.
No.
Okay, well that's Cushing and Lee. That's top line Hammer cast. I think this is a Michael Gough movie. I think those other guys are there, sure, fine. Not even that much if you're Christopher Lee, but this is a Michael Gough movie.
I disagree, and I think the world is with me that Michael Gough is not giving his best here because he thinks he's above it.
I don't think he thinks he's above it. I'm not sure he knows what film he's in. They're like, have you heard of Dracula? He's like, well, not really. What was it? I've sort of heard of it, I guess. I've sort of heard of it. I'll give it a go.
Yeah. Why don't we, Sam? Why don't we drop a synopsis and get right into it? Because I've already tipped all of my hands.
Yeah, you don't have any hands left. Go on then. Synopsisize Dracula.
So Dracula, 1958, directed by Terence Fisher, written by Jimmy Sangster, both Hammer legends.
Good old Sangster.
Yeah. It starts out with Jonathan Not Harker going to Castle Dracula in...
Can I interrupt the synopsis to ask a question?
Yes.
Where the fuck does this movie take place?
So I looked this up, and Klausenberg is in Germany.
Right, but the castle's in Transylvania.
I mean, they never say Transylvania. And when Jonathan tootles up at the beginning of the movie on his carriage, it's got a Swiss flag. So, take of that what you will. Somewhere in deepest Bavaria.
Bavaria's a good catch-all.
Yeah. So, somewhere in deepest Bavaria, Jonathan Holmwood, is it Holmwood? Yeah. Jonathan Holmwood starts his job as librarian for Count Dracula. But unlike Jonathan Harker of the book, Jonathan Holmwood is already a vampire hunter and is there to kill Dracula.
He's allied with Van Helsing right from the beginning.
Right from the beginning. He meets Dracula's unnamed bride, and she bites him. He becomes a vampire. Word gets back to his sister and brother-in-law and his fiancée, and then, Dracula does some Dracula stuff. That's basically the movie, right?
Yeah. Imagine the book, but different. That's this Dracula.
Yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it, to think that the book was written, in the late 1800s, and the first movie, the Universal movie, was in the 30s. It's not that far apart.
No.
It's bizarre.
Yeah, well, Universal at this point held the rights to Dracula, and there was a deal between Hammer and Universal in order for them to use those rights based on Universal getting worldwide distribution rights.
Having the rights to Dracula is quite a significant score.
Yeah.
It's just like having the rights to music.
Yeah.
It's like all music.
But Dracula's public domain now, right?
Don't know.
I wonder if they've had like a Mickey Mouse type deal where they managed to escape public domain for a real long time.
Right. I think, are we having a break or are we carrying on?
Well, say what you got to say and then we'll have a break.
I'm just going to say, every production still of Christopher Lee from this movie, he's a dork. We have to dig into this. He looks like fucking...
I disagree. And we will dig into this after this break right now.
Whoa, holy shit. I guess that's why they call it Phantom Power.
Sam, I am back. Are you back?
I'm back.
I want to say that this podcast, Final Transmission, is brought to you by Red Scare Industries, a punk rock label celebrating 20 years of dreaming and scheming this year, Sam. How can one join in the festivities?
I would say pre-order the record in whatever format you want by going to redscare.net and just clicking those whatever fucking buttons. I would say you can even pre-save it on streaming platforms. You can come to a show in the US. There's a bunch of shit happening. Loads of stuff in Chicago, loads of stuff on the West Coast, loads of stuff in Vegas. Punk Rock Museum Takeover. I'm going to be at all of the stuff on the West Coast. Come say hi. Tell your friends. A compilation is a great way to get into a bunch of new bands if you've snoozed on them. So, just spread the word, comrades.
Yeah, go to redscare.net. Pre-order your comp now. Listen to it when you can and have, 15 to 20 new favorite bands.
Yeah, free Jamie Nude with every pre-order.
That's not true and not a selling point.
I think it's a really good idea to say things that are untrue in order to achieve some kind of commercial goal, but then immediately say that's not true afterwards because it still goes into people's brains.
Yeah, that's why solicitors say things, lawyers say things that immediately get stricken from the record, but the jury's already heard it. They've already
They don't give
internalized
a
it.
fuck about the record. The record is their brain.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're all as dumb as jurors.
Have you ever done jury duty?
Absolutely not. I've seen the Pauly Shore movie.
Gagging for it. I really want to.
I hate cops.
Hmm.
And so the idea of aiding and abetting the police via my judgment, it's not
You
for
haven't
me.
thought this through, have you? I'll tell you what we need to put in front of a jury. Is Dracula a dork? The answer is yes. He looks like the nerdy kid at the birthday party who's just too scared to like get involved and hang out, and he's just sort of like got drawing his lip back a little bit with his hands up by his chest in the background. I think Dracula is not scary in this movie, which I know is
That is huge.
a very bold statement from
Yeah.
the out. But I don't think this movie needs Dracula to be scary because he's in it for about 12 seconds. I think the idea of Dracula needs to be scary in this movie, and that is executed by the rest of the cast. I think Christopher Lee is fucking so overrated as Dracula, it's almost painful.
I think Bela Lugosi is overrated as Dracula. So we're coming at this from absolutely opposing viewpoints.
Well, that's good. I also agree that he's overrated as Dracula, but I think he's highly rated for a reason. I think Christopher Lee in this makes a funny face 3 or 4 times, delivers some horribly plummy dialogue in an English accent, disappears for an enormous period of time, and then doesn't do much at all.
Well, I think I agree that obviously there's not enough Dracula in this movie, and also that there's not enough Christopher Lee in this movie. But I do think what he does is scary, and I think the way that Dracula sort of permeates this movie without even being there is where the magic sits, really.
Agreed. And I'm not crediting Christopher Lee with things that he does when he's off screen.
No.
I think that's the rest of the cast building that
I think it's
tension
the
and
music
propping
more.
up the mythology and fucking music, Jesus. Yeah. I think the best thing Christopher Lee does in this movie is open his eyes once. I think that's a great scene. But again,
When he bursts in at the beginning, when the bride is biting Jonathan, and he doesn't want her to do that. In the book, he would feed her a bag of dead babies or whatever it is.
bag of dicks.
Yeah, he is so scary in that moment. His eyes are all red, he's a feral Dracula. I love that.
We could probably go through everything Dracula does in this movie in a real short period of time, so maybe we should. That scene, I think, is lauded very highly as being a very scary Dracula scene, right? The close-up tight shot of the face with the red eyes. I just think it's a big old silly joke. He looks baked. It just looks, I don't know, it's really fucking low rent, and if it wasn't so well shot, it would be a dismal failure as a scare, I think. What's he bringing in terms of the fear factor there? It's a strangely composed moment. He just bursts in. That doesn't seem, I don't know, maybe it just runs in contrary to my idea of Dracula in my mind, but he doesn't bring the fear in that scene for me. It's an explosive entrance, sure, but he looks silly.
I don't think he looks silly. I think he looks like if you were to say Dracula and I closed my eyes, he is what I'm seeing. Particularly in that moment.
That exact scene, that exact shot is the cover of one of the best books I have about vampires, and it doesn't really talk much about vampires in popular culture. It's more about lore. It's like a sociological look at vampires. It sort of digs into the mythology a little bit more.
Is it one of the
but for some reason,
Montague Williams or whatever? One of those ones?
I'm stalling while I try and find it on the fucking shelf, but I think I've moved it. It's used on the cover of that book because it's so iconic, and you see it everywhere. And I just don't buy into it as the big scare.
I had a collection of compilation CDs when I was a kid that were called Flesh Eater that had that image of Christopher Lee as Dracula on the cover. And I rinsed those CDs so much. It was like 80s sort of goth and spooky new wave and spooky end of punk. So the Damned were on it, and
Nice.
Alien Sex Fiend and Sex Gang Children and bands like that. Gay Bikers on Acid. Lydia Lunch, stuff like that, and I would rinse it. And I think that the combination of like all of that music when I was like very influential age and that image has basically informed who I am as a person throughout my entire life.
Yep, that tracks. So I think this is one of those moments in a movie where you have the choice as to whether you buy in or not. If you buy in hard, wow, terrifying. If you don't, it's almost comical. The blood is just red paint. He just has red eyes, and it's just a man making a funny face. But there's so much happening in the wider context of this being Dracula that I think it gets a pass. And I'm just not 100% sure what it is that doesn't work for me. I think it's because the stoic, gothic, distant, frightening, mysterious, transforming, shifting nighttime Dracula is way more scary to me than the guy who bursts in and shouts. I think what is scary about it is the sudden change in his temperament, I guess, to an audience who maybe doesn't know what's coming somehow.
Yeah.
He goes from being very hospitable and very curt to, explosive. So I guess that's jarring, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, that is what I think Christopher Lee does so well here, is that he sort of toes the line when he's being sort of polite to Jonathan in that first scene where they're together. You feel something sort of simmering below there. And then like it comes out so quickly. And like normally you would expect to wait an entire movie for that explosion. And the fact that it comes out so quickly and we establish that there's such a fine line between like friendly Dracula and unfriendly Dracula that like I think that's what jars.
Yeah, I mean, what I find difficult about that entire interaction at the start of the movie, basically the first 10 minutes of the movie, is just how aloof he is. And I've watched this film so many times. I've seen it in a cinematic presentation. I've seen it at home, seen it all over the place. And there's just something missing in terms of spark from, like, there's no chemistry there really for me. And like some people read it as he's hungry and that's why he is the way he is and he's got to leave. And I get that. I understand the concept of Dracula, but it's not, I don't know, it's just not forward enough for me. Maybe it's, there's just a real wooden nothingness to all of their interactions that doesn't ring true, because the book, to me, again, if we fucking compare to the book, we'll be here all day, but there's so much warmth in that relationship in the book, and there's so much horror in the dissolution of that relationship and the slow betrayal and the creeping realization of who and what Count Dracula is. So we don't get that in this movie. We get a very immediate and different storyline where he's a vampire hunter deceiving Dracula to try and get him, which is very fun for the movie, but it doesn't bring with it the same kind of build for me.
No, but I think that's what's interesting, is that they recognized maybe that they didn't have the space within the budget and the time frame and the runtime that they were going for to really sell that relationship. So they wrote something that they could sell, and maybe that's why it sits a bit colder, because like, Holmwood is, he's a, what's the word?
Librarian?
Vampire hunter. Because like he's already in on it. He already knows what's going on.
Yeah.
So like he's not going to be super chummy.
No. And I like it as a device. I think it really works in the movie. And again, just reframing the whole plot of Dracula, I think, is bold and cool.
Yeah.
I just don't think Christopher Lee lives up to that idea. He's Dracula in 7 Hammer movies?
6.
6. So is this his best portrayal of his best Dracula in all 6, do you think?
No.
No. What do you think's best?
I think in Dracula Prince of Darkness, where he doesn't speak, he is fucking terrifying. Much more screen time. There's arguments over whether he doesn't speak because he thought the dialogue was shit and he thought it'd be better off if he just didn't bother.
Yeah.
Jimmy Sangster says that's not true, that he just wrote no dialogue for Dracula. And that's, either one is fine. Like he's so scary in that movie.
What is Christopher Lee's relationship with Dracula here? Because he doesn't seem to like it very much.
So that's an interesting question, and I don't really know the answer. But like, Christopher Lee at least thought that he had found something new in Dracula, that he was sort of tragic and romantic and sexually charged.
Yeah.
Which, like, I would argue isn't new, because Bela Lugosi is super tragic and super romantic, and
Yeah.
the book is super tragic and super romantic, and he's, basically just trying to find love in all the wrong places. So I don't think that that's particularly new, but I think the way that Christopher Lee portrays it is super different. And I don't think he doesn't like it, though. I think it's more that he's always sort of slightly quivering with rage. I think that one of the things that Dracula does interestingly here, we very rarely see him be composed. That we see him in 4 scenes?
Yeah.
2 of them he's fucking,
Mm-hmm.
albeit implied. And 2 of them he is completely feral, off the leash, smashing things up, and his hair's all over the place. Like, I love the courage of, the movie and Christopher Lee and the director and everyone involved to let Dracula be fucking feral. You would never see Bela Lugosi's hair out of place. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just I hear what you're saying. I that rage and that hunger being pushed so far forward in his characterization of Dracula is definitely interesting. I just find him very wooden. He's a woodman. He's the woodsman.
He's not the woodsman.
Fucking hell, Christopher Lee as the woodsman.
Yeah.
I would like to see Kevin Bacon as Dracula, so I guess they could trade. There's a lot that I like about Christopher Lee as Dracula throughout all of the movies. So this isn't me saying I think he sucks. I just think there's something that's slightly unconvincing and unfulfilled, maybe, or just not fleshed out enough in the character. There's not enough expository Drac for my liking.
I think, like, I completely agree. And at the end of this movie, you are begging for more Dracula. And luckily, there are 7 more Dracula movies with him in. Well, there are 6 more Dracula movies with Dracula in them. And there is the direct sequel to this, The Brides of Dracula, which is good, but doesn't have Dracula in it.
Yeah, I saw Brides of Dracula last year at Colchester Arts Centre, which is an old converted church. And it was on a big screen with the ceiling all lit blood red.
Nice.
And there was free wine. And it was absolutely incredible, even though Dracula sucks in that movie.
Well, he's not Dracula.
Great.
He's Baron Meinster. And I think he's great. There's that one scene where he's like, this is a different movie, so sorry, listeners, whatever. If you watched Dracula to hear us talk about it, we're talking about a different movie. But there's that one scene where he's chained up and he gets the girl to release him, and he seems so pathetic and tragic in that scene.
Yeah.
And then in the next scene, he's just ripping throats. It's amazing.
Yeah. I should say Baron von Meistenhauser sucks. Him as the vampire is actually kind of fun.
Yeah.
One note to the makers of that movie, Hammer, House of Horror: turn down the sound of hooves. Forever in everything, please. Oh my God, Hammer movies. Just fucking turn down the sound of all feet. Bipedal, quadrupedal, is that a word? I don't know. All feet on floor, too loud. Chill the fuck out.
Yeah. Jonathan Harker in this, right? My first note about him is that he looks like Ernest.
Yeah, I could see that.
It was Jim Varney all the way for me. I would love to see Jim Varney as Dracula, though.
Yeah, I would pay good money to see that. Ernest scared straight's the closest you're gonna get.
Yeah, scared stupid.
Scared stupid, even better.
Yeah, they didn't put him in prison with a load of bubbas to
No, that would be great. Yeah, the less said about everyone else in this movie, the better. Really, the top three boys. Let's talk about them as much as possible. Such a crying shame that there aren't more strong portrayals of women in Dracula movies, because even I must have listened to 2 or 3 different audiobooks of Dracula, as well as obviously reading the novel and watching all the movies. And there's just never a good delivery of any of the fucking female characters or dialogue, really. Nothing that, reaches top line cast billing levels. Just piss poor treatment of the very, very important female aspects of the Dracula story, pretty much on all fronts. In this movie, fine, but just a bit dismissible, I think.
Yeah, I think like Mina is
Olga's
pretty good.
She's okay. Oh, she's good when she's vamped up. Yeah.
Yeah. And like when she's been vamped up, but it's not been revealed yet. I mean, it's pretty fucking obvious the way that she's holding her coat. But like it's not been like outed yet, and like she's being a bit coy with it. But like she's got such a level of like assertiveness in that scene specifically that I think is really good. And like I like the vampire bride.
Who's the at the beginning?
Yeah.
Yeah, deceptive vampire bride woman.
Yeah, who doesn't get a name and was only in this and Curse of Frankenstein and made no other movies. But I thought she was great. And like everyone else is kind of whatever. But like Peter Cushing, it sort of surprises me when I go back and watch like Peter Cushing be relatively young. He's like 45 when they made this. Like he's such a physical actor. The way that he like moves his body, the way that he like runs around and like moves really fast when he needs to. It's so kinetic and interesting to see, and it's like completely in character. I think he's cool as fuck. And like obviously he's Dr. Frankenstein in the movie that came out before this, the Frankenstein movie that Hammer made just before this. And like Van Helsing is incredibly different to Dr. Von Frankenstein. And I bet that's all him.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
I bet like Jimmy Sangster wrote both.
Yeah.
And I bet you 5 million synopsis that the script, the dialogue was basically identical.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. There's a bit of a factory approach to
Yeah.
the dialogue in a lot of these movies, especially when they're fucking half of them come from books anyway. I don't drink the Peter Cushing Kool-Aid either. I just think he's fucking boring. It's just an old, boring old man.
He's 5 years older than us in this film.
Yeah, I know, but doesn't he appear 500 years older than us in this movie? I don't know. For me, he's just another canvas for the beautiful movie and the classic story to play out through. I don't think he brings much magic to it. I get that you like him running around and stuff, but just doesn't do a lot for me. There's just not many things I really love Peter Cushing in enough to become a Cush head.
You don't love it when he sits around his office listening to the absolute fucking entry-level basics about vampire hunting.
No, dude, I don't. And I find it thoroughly unconvincing. I really, really don't like that scene.
It's so funny.
I like that he tries to hide it by saying he's talking to himself. I think that's great. There's a little bit of humor in there, but it's not funny enough because it's fucking Woodrow Wilson, the most wooden boy in the world. It's fucking Pinocchio goes to art school. Just a boring stick of a man. And that's fine.
I just completely disagree so wholeheartedly. I think like he is the only actual actor in the entire Hammer stable.
That doesn't make you great.
But
you're the only guy.
But it does, because it means that like he's the only person that's actually acting. Like if he was so incredibly wooden, then he wouldn't be different from movie to movie. And like he carries through his portrayal of Van Helsing in all of the Dracula movies that he's in.
Yeah.
But he's always different to all of the other movies that he's in where he's playing a different character.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I think he's a good actor. I think he's fine. I just think he's really boring in this and really stiff. He's a stiff old dick.
I don't think he is. I think like the way that he carries himself, I think the character is stiff. And he is embodying the sort of the stiffness of this stuffy vampire hunter.
But that's a weird take on Van Helsing. Come on, that's not the Van Helsing of anything. Van Helsing's passionate. That's his whole deal, is that he's a wild, passionate man, driven by science and driven by, the strength of the human spirit and the indomitable idea of good over evil and the power of science. He's not fusty smoking jacket man walking around making notes and sort of shyly entering rooms and then running away a bit with his pointy knees. It just feels weird to me. It's just, again, some people might say, what a brave take to not really do much and mumble a lot. I just think it's a little bit fucking dusty shelf.
You're being very mean to this film
Peter
that I
Cushing.
love, Sam.
Well, listen, Here's the big moment. Michael Gough is fucking sick in this movie.
But he isn't. He is not giving anything. And
He's great. He's perfect.
It sort of makes sense because his character is a fusty knobhead. But like, he's just not giving anything. He's not like, I quite like it too, but he's not really turned up for work that day.
I think he's absolutely given it the beans because everyone in this movie, inexplicably, deep in darkest Bavaria, is a plumtacular English toff knob. But he's the only one who it makes sense for. No, but Van Helsing should be fucking Dutch. Dracula should be from, drumroll please, Transylvania. Michael Gough's character, Arthur Holmwood, has every reason to be Captain Snob City. And he does it really well. Like all his lines are delivered either well or in a really interesting way. Like some hot takes on some line delivery from the Gothmeister.
He has some rough line deliveries. You sent me a little clip of one when you were watching. And like you could have sent me an absolute supercut of him in the entire movie. He is all over the map. And I just think it's because he's not really giving it the like I love Michael Gough and I've seen him in much trashier movies where he's
for sure.
Where he's giving it something. Horrors of the Black Museum. He's amazing. Where he's basically playing Vincent Price. And obviously we talked about Curse of the Crimson Altar where he's basically playing Boris Karloff. And like these are all
so good in that.
Yeah, these are all really fun, but when like for some reason I don't know if he wanted to be Dracula and he didn't get it, and so he was like, "Well, fuck you guys. I'm phoning this one in."
The wildest speculation coming out of you here. Do you know what? I see him as somebody who does his best work when he's understated or made small by a role. Do you know what I mean? When he's like in Curse of the Crimson Altar, he's this very creepy, very complicated character.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going on below the surface. In this, it's Hammer, it's Dracula, it's all on the surface and everyone knows the story. I think he's a little bit more in almost caricature mode than he is in other stuff. I mean, even in Sleepy Hollow, he plays a grizzled, browbeaten, kind of subservient type character in that and fucking nails it. He's rarely a great, leading man. I mean, he is in a few flicks. But here he brings an element of, so I think what you're saying is like phoning it in and not really trying. I just see it as a bit of fun. Like he's bringing a little bit of levity to the movie when it needs it. I think his comedic timing is great in this.
I don't know if that's true because I think he just he seems mad that he has to say these words. It doesn't feel like fun to me. It feels like he's like, oh, yeah, my niece has been bitten and now we have to go to the place.
What, you think it's lackluster?
Yeah.
Oh,
Hugely
wow.
lackluster.
Wow. Not a criticism I would have leveled at this, standing next to fucking Peter Cushing, who barely even looks like he's there. He's fucking transparent in this. I mean, in a pecking order, it's Gough steals the show. Christopher Lee is a great Dracula who occasionally looks so unforgivingly nerdy. And Peter Cushing is the car that everyone gets in to get through the story, basically. He's a part of the set.
I mean, again, I completely disagree. I think Peter Cushing is really understated and interesting in this, and it is a weird take on Van Helsing.
Yeah, that's what makes me think it's not really a take. It's just Peter Cushing being Peter Cushing with the name Van Helsing next to him.
But again, like if that was the case, then he would be Peter Cushing being Peter Cushing, but the name Dr. Frankenstein. But he's not that different. I know you keep saying. He's markedly different in those two movies.
Good, because it's two different characters in two different movies in two different universes. You would hope so, but it's still like, I don't know. He just doesn't fucking lean into it enough for me, and it's not a characterization of Van Helsing that, as a fan, I feel like I can get behind. There's just nothing to like about stiff, posh, plummy Van Helsing over wild-eyed Dutch madman Van Helsing, which I like a lot more, who's like fucking jumping on trains, traversing Europe, collecting herbs, running around shouting at people, making them cry, then telling them he loves them. There's so much scope in that character and so much you could do, especially given that he's essentially the leading man in this movie, which isn't typically a Van Helsing spot. And I feel like instead he fucking assumes the role of curator of the museum of stiff dicks and bored faces, and that's fine. It thankfully, and here comes the big posse. Apart from Michael Gough, this movie looks fucking spectacular. I think it's the best looking Hammer movie, best looking Dracula movie. The cinematography is stunning, and the lighting is tippity top tits for 90% of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go back to Van Helsing for a minute because I've got more to say.
I thought you might.
I hate Edward Van Sloan as Van Helsing in the 1931 Dracula.
Right. Okay.
Obviously, that's like the premier take on Van Helsing in cinema because, like, I don't even fucking remember who plays Van Helsing in the 90s one.
Hugh Jackman?
Hugh Jackman was Van Helsing in Van Helsing.
Clues in the name.
Yeah.
You mean in Bram Stoker's Dracula?
Yeah.
Oh,
Is it Anthony Hopkins?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Professor Abraham Van Helsing.
Also awful, but I think I might hate Anthony Hopkins.
Ooh, okay.
But like the accent that Edward Van Sloan is doing in the 30s version, in the Universal version, it is so insanely Scottish.
Right.
It makes me so angry to hear it. I can't.
What's that got to do with how shit Peter Cushing is?
I'm just talking about. I don't think he is.
Van Helsing broadly.
Yeah, I'm talking about Van Helsing more broadly.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the portrayal of Van Helsing by Peter Cushing in this movie is not its biggest crime. Its biggest crime is the complete omission of the existence of Renfield.
Yeah.
So crucial.
Yeah.
Just a crucial deet to overlook. Again, like, it's just another, and this is my problem with Hammer broadly, is that what people seem to love and find really fun about Hammer, I think is fucking bullshit. The opportunity for fun of bringing Renfield into this movie is absolutely boundless. And the opportunity for Peter Cushing or someone else to do a fun and exciting and arresting Van Helsing in the absence of Dracula is really fucking important, and they don't deliver. So, you know, if it wasn't for the cinematography, this movie would, in my opinion, be drifting into a catalogue of very, very weak Hammer movies.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see a Renfield here. Slip a little Tom Waits. Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, he was around. Maybe not, well, probably the right age. I like to imagine Renfield older than he's usually portrayed.
Like Tom Waits in Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, or, I mean, put Gough in Renfield. Do double whammy. Gough gets to be both. Fuck it. Like, do Wild Man Renfield.
I don't know if I buy both, but like I do think that a freaky little Michael Gough would work as a Renfield.
Definitely. Again, just another reason it's really interesting that we both love this movie for completely different reasons, and I just think it's teetering on the brink of being a really bad movie, but it just somehow fucking lurches over to being a great movie. There's very few that are that close to both fucking ends of the spectrum for me. And for a Dracula movie, it's absurd.
Yeah, I don't think it's teetering at all. I think it's firmly in the great movie camp.
Why do they decide that Dracula can't turn into creatures of the night, and why do they do the call was coming from inside the house all along in this film? Why do either of those things have to be?
Well, I think point one is so we don't get ridiculous bats on string like in 1931,
which we love.
I mean, we do love.
And we also love in what's the other one called? Brides of Dracula? Superb bats on strings.
Yeah. But like, that's why they don't do it here.
Right. They could do it better.
They could do it better.
They also had access to real animals. Like, they were allowed to just like kick a wolf around and film it. Like, they could do whatever the fuck they want, and they chose not to.
And then the second point, because it's cool, because it means that they can have a whole scene where they're patrolling to make sure Dracula doesn't get in, and he still gets in. Do you think
that bit's quite funny though?
Yeah, I think it's funny, but I also think it's cool that like they're outside trying to stop Dracula from getting in, and he's already there.
Yeah,
he's already
that's scary.
Like the idea, this is what I mean. Like Dracula sort of permeates the entire movie. Like he's always sort of there, even though you can't see him.
Yeah,
like he's always.
But that's my fear. That's fundamental to the fear of Dracula, is that he's always there.
Yeah.
I love that about Dracula, but the way that it's conveyed in sort of, I don't want to say better media, but like, but I also don't want to say the book, but like the scariest Dracula appearances in all of media is when he's doing something that fucking absolutely should not be happening and that defies the the realm of reason in which we're firmly planted by our protagonist, and that is wholly creepy and menacing. So climbing the castle walls is the scariest shit that's ever happened. Like reading that is the scariest thing that has ever happened to me as a human being. The bit where he's climbing the castle walls upside down and Harker looks out his window and sees him, creeping around like a spider. So that Dracula to me is pervasive in his evil because he can transform into creatures of the night, because he can hypnotize people, because he is so, charming and magnetic, and somehow, despite looking incredibly fucking weird and thousands of years old, can seamlessly blend into London society and buy property and, just sort of become a person in the world, but then can also transform and immediately rip your head off. And he's an ancient evil, that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
This Dracula doesn't have a lot of that gravitas, and it makes the movie, for me, just slot a little bit more into like trash fiction, which is great. It's, fucking love it. But it does detract from that all-present evil because Christopher Lee just goes away and the rest of the cast keep it going by working really hard. He's not buffeting at the window with his, his bat wings. He's not howling in the night. He doesn't transform into a dog and cross the ocean. There's no reference to the Demeter or any of that fun shit.
Well, no, because the Demeter in this is the coach.
Is a carriage that goes fucking 12 feet up the road. Again, the proximity to the castle doesn't work for me. Like, the fact that they're just up the road is just bizarre.
There's a border in between.
Yeah.
But, like, that's it. They are pretty close. It is. I mean, it's a much smaller Dracula movie.
Yeah. Because it's Hammer, right?
Yeah. And, like, it's pretty cheaply made.
Yeah.
But I think they got value for money.
Well, that's exactly what I mean. This is my whole point. All of that said, it's worth digging into why we fucking love this movie so much, right? Because some of the sets are jank as fuck, but some of these shots are just fucking mind-bendingly beautiful.
I love that there are 4 sets and they just dress them slightly differently every time.
Yep.
Like those stairs are in basically every shot. It's fucking amazing.
Yep. Yeah, it's ridiculous. The castle isn't the scary gothic, towering masterpiece castle that we get in other Draculas. It's not, Castle Dracula is the biggest, baddest character in Dracula, in my opinion. Like, it's so fucking important. And in this, it's like grey painted walls and a leopard skin rug. It's so bad, but somehow fucking works.
I think like the sets that they have for the outside, like the fool your eye, like sort of diminishing distance sets and like matte paintings are not good enough that you look at them and go, that's real. I see that.
Yeah.
But like you look at them and go, okay, I can imagine that that's a real place.
I think they're really fun. I think they're bang on stylistically for the movie. And like you say, they don't yank you out of it, but you can be convinced by it if you want to be. This whole movie is about how much you lean into it, I think. And if you let your eye drift on that horizon, fuck yeah, it's there.
I remember maybe the 3rd or 4th time I watched this as like a teenager and being like, wait, that's the same place. Those are the same steps. They all lead to the same little 2-step bit. There's a door there. We can go up the steps onto the little balcony bit. Like it's always the same.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I love it. What a dream.
It's good fun. Definitely good fun. So, well, all of that in mind, it still amazes me when I watch this, especially the BFI restored version that I think we both watched, right?
I watched the 2012 version, I think. So the version on Prime is 1 hour 19. I think the 2007 version is 1 hour 21 and change. And the 2012 version is 1 hour 22 and change.
That's the one I watched.
Okay.
I think even on repeated viewing, I'm still just gobsmacked at how pretty the scary scenes are, basically. Dracula in his coffin, anytime anyone's face is shown, Dracula's eyes opening, even the silly scare on the stairs, or, fucking hell, it's just really pretty.
Yeah, the silhouette when Jonathan is hammering into the bride is so, like, obviously it's not incredibly violent because we're watching a silhouette hammer into something. But like, it feels so violent. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to see the thing to feel it. And like, you absolutely feel it in that moment. And it's really good. Fucking, frankly, stupid that he decided to go with the bride first.
Yeah, dude. It's so hard to get past why that happens. There's no reason you wouldn't fucking stake Dracula first. I don't get it. It drives me nuts.
Yeah. My big criticism of this movie is that I don't like how the stakes look.
Yeah, they do look a little bit like just fucking chair legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like big, like thick branches that have been whittled into a spike.
I like it looking like a branch. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Not like you went to the shop and bought a stake.
Yeah.
Which is probably what they are. They're probably yard stakes. Like,
Yeah.
that's what they got.
Far to a
Yeah, I
point.
like a man who carves his own steak, if you know what I'm saying. Gross misjudgment on the part of the vampire hunter to kill the vampire bride a mere 6 feet away from the king of the night, the lord of darkness himself, the master of all evil, Dracula, laying in his coffin, asleep.
Like, has he never killed a vampire before? Was he like, oh, if I do this, maybe she'll just be completely silent and just let it happen?
Yeah, or maybe she'll scream like a mad woman and wake up, dun dun dun, Dracula, who you just looked at and walked away from. Yeah, it's dumb as a fucking shoe. I think if they were really I mean, I'm just glad Van Helsing didn't find out that happened.
Yeah.
So what keeps us coming back to this version of Dracula, for all its warts, of which there are many? Why? Pourquoi?
I think that the scene, the disintegration scene at the end is fucking amazing. If
Right,
it wasn't for
to...
the orange googly eye, which is the one thing that bugs me.
Right, okay. Hold your horses, young man. You're about to assert a lot of strong opinions, and I want you to just treat me like it's my first time, okay? Take it slow.
Okay, so
this scene is contentious, to say the least.
Watching Dracula's limbs melt into dust over the course of what feels like 4 minutes. It's probably about 90 seconds in the actual edit.
Yeah, if that, yeah.
But it feels like it takes ages. I mean, sure, the logistics of it don't quite work. His limbs melt one by one. He's got an orange googly eye when his face is melting. But like watching the hand or the ankle is the good one. Like melt away, the bones sticking out of it. When he runs his hand across his face and like rips his skin off. It feels so final and so real. We've actually killed Dracula. Don't worry, he's back for 7 more movies. But like, we've killed Dracula. It's amazing. It feels so visceral and so real in a movie where like all of the blood is the reddest thing you've ever seen, and like also just sometimes there for no reason. When he bursts in and he's all red-eyed and angry, where's the blood coming from? Like what's?
Yeah, he's always got blood coming out of his mouth inexplicably.
Yeah, or like in the opening sort of title sequence where like blood just starts dripping on the casket, not the casket, the tomb. Like, where's that coming from? Just like random blood, but it's cool, so that's fine. But like, there's no blood in this, and it feels like the most violent thing you could ever see.
I think that's, I'd say 90% the death performance by Christopher Lee. I think it's absolute magic. His acting in this scene is like pure anguish and agony, which has to be for Dracula dying by sunlight. And Peter Cushing's great in this scene as well. This is when I think he's embodying that kinetic energy you're talking about, where he's bounding around and leaping off stuff and thrusting across. And everyone, well, so should I say, both of them are absolute 10 in this scene.
Yeah.
I'm aching to know what you really think of the effects in the Dracula death scene.
I think they're amazing. Like,
really? Okay.
It's 1958. What do you want from them?
I really like the bit where they drag his trouser leg up slowly. You see the fucking melty leg under the trouser leg. And the googly eye? Whose idea was that?
I mean,
you're fired.
The googly eye.
Go to jail. Go to horror movie jail for the rest of your life. This movie. How are we giving this movie not only a pass, but we're clearly going to rate it 10 out of 10 when Dracula dies by sunlight and there is an orange googly eye on screen for everyone to see. An orange googly eye. What were they doing?
It's probably a normal coloured googly eye, but it's lit orange from underneath. So
who put googly eyes in there, and why aren't they in jail?
I think probably they bought a skull from a Woolworths or something. That's
definitely it.
That's my hypothesis. They bought a funny little Halloween skeleton.
Oh, Anatomy of a Death scene with Christopher Lee as Dracula. The hand crumbling.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Amazing.
Pretty convincing.
Yeah.
All of his physical acting while the light's being shined on him. Superb. The ashen bones disintegrating, the sleeve dragging away. I'm still with you. I think it's fine. The head melting googly eye. Not 100% sold on it. The hand dragging down the face. Scary. The withered ash hand just sort of sliding down a little bit is where it sort of loses me. That's pre-googly eye. Then the googly eye is the, shall we say, nail in the coffin. The deflating suit. You might have gone too far.
I think we're back in business at that point.
Yeah, okay, we kind of have to be, right? Yeah, superb performance, very fun. I think in terms, it's just weird to see Dracula go in this very grey, sort of atmospherically grey, should we say, very stiff, plummy English Dracula movie. To see him go in such a googly-eyed comical fashion is ultimately, I think, after years of thinking about it, pretty wonderfully fun.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think it's a joy, and like there have been times I've watched it and been like, "This is so dumb. I'm having a great time," and there are times I watch it and I'm like, "Fucking hell, these effects are incredible."
They're not. You can't say that. They're just not. But there's something very dark about it. There's something much darker in the execution than in the breakdown of the actual things that are happening, because they are just fucking almost unforgivably dumb.
Yeah.
But again, someone somewhere is working some magic, because I keep going back to that scene and really fucking enjoying it over and over and over. It's the best scene in the movie, I think.
I think it is. I would completely agree with that.
I think if your climax is your best scene, you've done well in terms of creating a movie that works, because so often I'm fucking done and completely tapped out by the quote-unquote boss fight, or, the final confrontation or whatever. Whereas this is a perfect build to that scene, and it gives us everything we want in one big smash. The music works, everything works, even the googly eye.
Can I rant about something in this movie, but also in all vampire media forever?
Yes.
Fucking crucifixes, right? Why?
Well, as explained in this movie, because it's a symbol of the triumph of good over evil. That's what it is in this.
That's horseshit, right?
Well, yeah, but that's what Hammer say in this film.
Okay, fine for this film if you want to, but I hate the implication that God is real via crucifixes hurting vampires. I like it in Salem's Lot or whatever, where it's like, it's the faith that you're putting into this thing that makes it work.
Oh yeah, the dumbest thing is the person making a cross out of two straight objects, and somehow that defeats the greatest evil on earth.
Which happens in this movie.
Yeah, the dumbest shoe in the fucking shoe shop. Ridiculous. It works as a dramatic visual device, is all I can say in this movie.
Yeah.
It completely falls apart with even the most cursory of scrutiny. It ain't a thing.
Why haven't we seen a movie where someone's holding like a fucking menorah? Back, you beast!
Yeah. Well, you would get that in a Stephen King version, I guarantee it. Like, that would be a thing. Yeah, it's another thing that doesn't fly that well in this Dracula is, the use of the crucifix isn't exactly nailed. I do like the completely inexplicable and nonsense fading of the crucifix burn on, is it Mina's hand at the end?
Yeah, and the dude's head.
Yeah.
Like, I love that we get that level of violence that, like, I think the shot of when they put the crucifix on the dude's head, like you don't see that again until Fright Night, which is like 30 years later, which is bonkers.
Yeah.
And I love the violence of that. The idea that like they're not just scared of the crucifix and they're scared of the idea that God's going to come down and kick him in the balls or whatever, but like it actually physically hurts them.
Yeah. I like that take on a crucifix, like an acidic burning, to the touch.
Like I just don't buy it as a thing because it then, like I say, implies that God really exists.
Yeah, it's just a movie though. You don't have to believe in God if you enjoy the movie. I think the existence of Dracula, like, is kind of predicated on the idea of the existence of God. Dracula's got to have an ultimate enemy, right? Dracula versus God, starring Jamie Carruthers as Dracula.
When does Dracula ever fight God? Because I would fucking watch the fuck out of
In every movie, bud. Dracula and God have one big thing in common. They're everywhere.
How do you feel about like when the sex is implied in this movie? Do you think
I honestly don't even get that it's really implied. That was sort of news to me when you said that earlier.
Like there's two scenes, one with Lucy and one with Mina, where he like comes into their room at night. With Lucy, it's a bit just more like he comes in through the window and then like climbs on her on the bed and whips his cape up. And so like the implication there is that they're fucking under the cape. But like it's not super nailed on. Whereas like with Mina, I think it is pretty nailed on. Like they walk into the bedroom together. He like slams the door behind them and then whips the cape up. It's like there's like the whole act of going to the bedroom. He could just bite her on the sofa. Like we've all done it on the sofa when we can't be asked to go to the bedroom. So like he could just do it there. But like they have this whole act of getting up and walking into the bedroom. I was wondering if it like the way that like sexuality was shown in like media around this time, maybe a bit earlier than this, was so like repressed that like you would only ever show people sleeping in separate beds and stuff. So the idea of like two people walking into a bedroom together and shutting the door when you know that one of them is going to violate the other one, either like physically and violently or sexually. That's quite a bold move for 1958.
Yeah, if that's what's being said, then I think that is a big old fuck you to a lot of social sensibilities at the time. I honestly just thought he was feeding. I think I don't see Christopher Lee as even remotely sexual I'm going to go as far as to say in any movie, but especially not in this.
You don't think in The Wicker Man when he's got his fucking jodhpurs on or whatever?
Dude, it's going to amaze you. No. Also, double no. just a hard no. I think the sexuality of Dracula to me has to be a bit more overt for me to get it or to buy into it. Maybe he has to be in his nest of succubi. He has to be surrounded by vampire brides who are all begging for his, penetration. I just thought he was eating. Just thought he was chowing down because he's a hungry Drac in this. He's rakish. He's thin. He's prowling. He seems never to be satiated. Even in his coffin, he looks fucking starving. So I guess I just read it as Transylvanian hunger, if you will. But makes sense. Why else would he lead her to the bedroom if they weren't trying to tell us they were fucking? I don't know. Does he fuck them? Or does he just fuck his brides? I thought he just fucked his brides.
Well, they're both in line to be his brides, right?
Yeah, they're
like he's trying to get a new bride because...
Yeah, because what's his cock killed the other one? Yeah. Greedy Drac.
It doesn't work out with Lucy, so he goes for Mina.
Yeah,
and like Lucy's too young anyway. She is giving off 16-year-old vibes. I don't know how old she actually is, but like
that was another thing I didn't understand. Where, like either first watch or rewatch because I forget the little details of this movie, but. When it's implied that Dracula goes after her because he's lost his bride, I was like, what the fuck? He's gone all the way from Transylvania to like South London to get this woman who he saw a picture of once. No chance. This is fucking dumb as fuck. And then I realized it's round the corner. Of course he's done that. There's no sea voyage. There's nothing. He just walks down the road.
He nipped there on his way back from the spa.
Yeah, exactly. Just stop off, bite a few birds. When it comes to the big reveal that he's in the basement the whole time, I think it's a really cleverly orchestrated set of events because like you said, if we have sexy Drac, if that's what's happening here, then it's doubly funny and doubly creepy that he's in the basement. Because I thought, like, just from a feeding angle, that's scary and funny. Because if you take the anatomy of these whole scenes apart and you think, okay, so the big reveal of him being in the basement could fall flat if the music isn't right, if the acting is off pitch ever so slightly. It could just be, oh, he's in the basement all along, move on. But it is a big reveal, and it is a scary reveal, and it's facilitated by Olga, and it's built up really well. So I think it adds to it if he's in the basement, like his coffin's in the basement. That's the funny reveal, I think, the coffin being there. But he's in the basement the whole time. He's sneaking out. He's banging them, and he's feeding on them right under their noses.
It's amazing.
It's really fucking absurd when you think about it, actually. Dracula would never do that. Hang on. So his big plan here is that he tells his victim to tell the fucking housemaid no one's allowed in the basement. And then he puts his biggest vulnerability, his resting place with his grave dirt, just in the basement, and then just sleeps there all the time and just goes upstairs and bites and fucks and goes and sleeps. This is a Dracula in this movie who doesn't really want to survive the film, I don't think. I think he's on a fucking suicide mission.
Yeah, I think maybe the Jimmy Sangster didn't quite think it through. But like,
he's got a full-on death wish.
What I think is interesting is that when Jonathan's bitten at the beginning, he has the presence of mind to be like, I'm here on a mission. So if I'm gonna turn into one of these creatures of the night, I want to at least try and complete my mission.
Yeah.
And so that really, to me, implies that these women, Lucy and Mina, absolutely want to be fucking Dracula. Because the second she gets bitten, Mina specifically, Lucy as well, because she's in her room, and like she's obviously super stoked about getting Dracula to come back in. And Mina is like coyly hiding her bite marks and being like, no, you guys go out and stay out late. Don't worry about me. I'll just be here on my own, not fucking a vampire in our bed. Like,
it makes no sense, because classically they would be enthralled, wouldn't they? He would have hypnotized them and would be feeding on them slowly in order to drain them. But in this, he wants to make them his wives, but he's also feeding on them, and they're also, as you say, willing without being hypnotized.
Yeah, I think they're enthralled by what is meant to be his like raw sexuality. Obviously, your mileage may vary on that, but like that's what it's meant to be.
The tank is dry. There is no raw sexuality to
You've cummed it all out.
Yes, there's no fucking way. You couldn't siphon a drop out of this desiccated carcass of a man. And he's in his prime. It's so bizarre. I can't get over how fucking crusty mustard this whole cast is. That's baffling, dude. That whole scenario has baffled me. We should never have read into this one. We should have just enjoyed it. We should have just fucking slapped it on and watched it and loved it.
I did that. I watched it. I still love it forever.
Yeah. I find it really hard to watch this movie in any way other than as follows. At night, in the absolute depths of autumn, when it's about to turn into winter, with all the lights off, just this on, nothing else happening, alone. That's the perfect way to watch this film, I think.
Yeah, I think that's solid. I could watch it with someone, but they have to be paying attention.
Yeah.
This is not the movie where it's like, okay, who's that? Fuck you. Who's that?
I mean, valid question, because who the fuck is anybody in this movie? Unrecognizable versions of classic literary figures, but sure. It's probably the only movie I think it's fine to ask that question multiple times. Yeah, I just think it's a very arresting movie. Tonally, it's really strong despite so many flaws. Visually, it's highly consistent, deeply beautifully shot in a lot of really, really key places. And overall, again, somehow in the face of glaring, ridiculous plot holes and issues with consistent character and strange action, etc., it just pulls off a really fucking magnificent and strange retelling of one of my favorite stories ever. And for that, you got to tip your foot, doff your stovepipe, whatever the fuck.
Doff your stove off.
I doff my stove to you.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't we take a break, Sam, and come back and wrap it up?
All right, let's snap one off.
Will you give it up, man? Nobody's out there. We're alone. Oh no, there's somebody out there. I'm picking up all this crosstalk.
Ooh, I think we're back.
I think we're back too, Sam.
Looks like we're summing up Dracula,
Well,
1958.
it might look like that, but what we're actually doing is inviting people to follow us on social media at FD Horror Show.
How glamorous.
I would say that following us on social media is a lot like inviting us to stay in your basement.
I 100% agree, yeah.
We'll pop out occasionally, give you what you need, not bother you in the daytime hours.
I'm going to pull up my cape around us and show you my content.
And if you like it, tell your friends.
Yeah, tell your friends. The next time you head out, say, come over and look at my basement. It's full of content. Ooh, off the rails. I think you should definitely rate and review this podcast if you give a shit about anything happening in your ears right now, because it helps.
It does help. And like I say, tell your friends, tell them about the Final Transmission podcast, tell them what they're missing. Look at this great analysis that we've done of Dracula, where Sam has just ragged on it for 4.5 hours and is about to give it 10 out of 10.
Therein lies the mystery of how this movie works. I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't care. It's just good.
Can I sum up before you, Sam? I've got some things I want to say.
Yeah, here it comes. Your Honor.
Am I? I better get off.
This is your jury moment. This is your closing statements to the jury for the prosecution. No, sorry, you're clearly the defense. Go on.
This is my Perry Mason moment, right?
Yep.
So the reason that I think that Dracula 1958 works,
Objection.
you're having some poppers.
Yeah, just to get me through your summary.
Yeah, the reason that I think that it works is that it's so modern. I think that modern horror films, and particularly the Universal horror remakes of old Universal horror movies, follow the template of this movie much more than they follow the original Dracula, for instance. Think about The Mummy. Think about like Brendan Fraser's version of The Mummy is like, it's basically an action movie. It's basically an Indiana Jones movie.
Yes.
And like, this movie is basically, it's action Dracula, right? There's loads of weird actiony things that aren't happening in the book, that don't happen in the 1931 version, that don't happen in basically any other version. There's loads more fighting, there's loads more like swashbuckling, and like a lot of that happens off screen or is like very implied. But like, that's why I think this stands the test of time, because it feels like, despite the received pronunciation and the old style performances and the old style directing and the fact that there is 3 sets that they reuse over and over and over again, and the fact that the blood looks like that and the gore is cool but not good, despite all of that, the fact that it feels modern and it's set the template so clearly is why I think this continues to work to this day. What do you think, Sam?
I don't think we're at the point in the podcast where I can refute your closing statement.
Okay. I also think that it does sometimes feel that like punches are pulled. And it's because the BBFC at the time would basically ask you to see your script before you shoot.
Yeah.
And be like, no, that's out. So like they were always fighting a losing battle. They basically had to fight to get an X rating, which is fucking bonkers.
For this, that's almost beyond comprehension. Like, so
like,
dumb.
The stuff that you would see in later Hammer films.
Yeah.
There is one heaving bosom in this film.
And
like, for a company where you're expecting to see 8 to 12 heaving bosoms per movie.
I mean, this bosom does heave for a whole ship full of bosoms. It does a great job, not taking anything away from that.
But it's a higher cut bosom than you would expect as well.
Yeah, definitely.
There's no Fidella Fielding, like, breathy, the dress just about covers the nipples stuff here.
No.
And like bonkers that like they had to fight for an X rating.
Yeah.
This movie feels tame, super, super tame.
Do you think it's just the presence of blood around the mouth? Do you think that's what tipped it?
I think it was more that they were expecting it to be sexier than it is, and that we do get some of that sexy stuff.
Mm.
There is some blood, but I think censors historically don't care about violence. They only care about sex. Up until the 80s. I think the way that the music is used in this, sometimes the music is a bit egregious and a bit over the top and a bit overwritten. But I think like the subtle changes on a theme are massively influential in like score writing. There's like the Vampire Bride has a theme, and then like there's like a major key version of it when Lucy's bitten, but we don't know that she's evil or she's not gone fully evil yet.
It's very clever, yeah.
And then like it becomes more minor as she sort of changes. Oh, it's fucking great.
Yeah, and that is some great music work. I completely agree. For me, it's taken way too much out of the Creature from the Black Lagoon book in terms of really stabby, really obnoxious, really full on. Maybe trying to overcompensate a little bit, but there are some real subtle flourishes that are pretty magical.
Yeah, and like the Dracula theme, obviously, it basically plays throughout.
Yeah, it's kind of an acquired taste as well, I think, that specific piece.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've acquired that taste, I would say.
Yeah.
But like, that's the thing that I think really sells the sort of all-permeating sense of Dracula. And like in a different film, in a film that I don't necessarily love as much as this, let's say Creature from the Black Lagoon, I would find it challenging.
Right.
But because I like this film more, I like Creature from the Black Lagoon a whole shit ton, but I like this film more. It doesn't bug me in the same way. It doesn't feel like I'm being punched in the face by a composer.
Yeah. It doesn't feel as sort of cut and paste and reuse.
No, and I guess it's because like thematically it makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't feel like in the Creature of the Black Lagoon, I don't feel like the music is representative of the creature hiding in the trees. But in this, I do feel like it's representative of Dracula waiting in the wings to do something fucked up at some later date.
Sure.
And so maybe that's why it gets a pass, because it sort of almost feels diegetic, but obviously isn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my sum up, Sam. I fucking love this movie.
Yeah, I thought you did.
I mean, I said it the second we jumped on the call.
Yeah.
I give it,
Here we go.
I need to think of something funny. I've not thought of anything funny yet. I give it 4 out of 4 uses of the same set. That's what I give it.
That's a high rating, Jamie. That's 100%. That's a big one.
Yeah.
What
about you, Sam?
I'm gonna keep it short and sweet. This movie is a fucking batshit roller coaster of total nonsense most of the time, and the execution is absolutely all over the shop. But there's so much about it to love that it just eclipses all of the problems, all of the warts, everything basically. The fact that I go back to this reliably every couple of years, which is a lot for me, in winter, just to really soak up the atmosphere, says a lot. It's such an atmospheric masterpiece with so little. How you make such an atmosphere statement out of a grey painted cardboard wall is absolutely amazing to me, and that's in the true spirit of the original movie as far as I'm concerned. It simultaneously is somehow crumbly, bone dry, devoid of character, and simultaneously wormy and evil and insidious and creepy and off balance and strange. And I think that's almost definitely deliberate, and who cares? It's really good fun. I'm going to give this 7.5 orange googly eyes out of 10.
Okay, that's lower than I was expecting.
Because there's just too much wrong with it to say that it's great. Do you know what I mean? I really enjoy it, but if someone like me can sit and just fucking point out so much that's going wrong, it is hard to give it a higher rating. I do really, really like it. I do
Yeah.
think there's a way to watch this movie that is an absolutely end-to-end fantastic experience. But for a movie to be great for me, it needs to have that sort of consistent delivery, and I just can't quite get there with this one. But I do just enjoy it so much. It's probably my favorite Hammer movie. I get an enormous bang out of this, and I would wholeheartedly encourage people to watch it under cover of darkness on a winter's eve.
Yeah, I'd like to think that we'll cover Dracula, Prince of Darkness at some point soon.
That would be great. I would say the only movie I've seen by Hammer that I absolutely hated, like fully hated, is Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think it's awful. I just think I don't understand why it exists.
I mean, it exists because they had some sets that they could already use, right? Isn't that generally the vibe?
It just has such a great cover. You would expect it to rip, but it sucks. Yeah, I don't know. We should do more Cushing for sure, because I need to be won over big time. I think it's really easy to like him just because he's quite a likable old man a lot of the time, but he's got a long way to go for me to really buy in and be, to attend Cush Fest. I'm going to need a little bit of convincing.
Again, he in this movie is 5 years older than us.
I know. And Christopher Lee, again, I can't say I love him as an actor. I just think, broadly speaking, he's not my cup of tea.
I think as an actor, he's
not in any movies that I love.
You don't love The Wicker Man?
I like The Wicker Man a lot.
So I think as an actor, he seems quite one note, and you have to really scrutinize his performances to see the tiny nuance of difference.
That just comes across as stiffness and one note to me.
Yeah, well, I could see that, but I don't. I think
Count Dooku. How about Count Dooku and his little moped in the sky? What a crock of shit!
Yeah, Count Dooku can do one. We need more Cushing for the pushing, right?
Thanks for listening to Final Transmission, everyone. It's been an absolute hoot and a holler. See you next week.
See you next week.